You can't handle the truth.
Hi, and welcome to 647. 6 stories for 7 a.m., but not today. A different format today because we want you to get the truth. And last week I was trying to cover the Fort Stewart shooting, and I couldn't get any kind of substantive information about it. And I think it's important. And one of our listeners, who is a good friend of mine and an ex-deputy sheriff and an ex-Afghan warrior and somebody who just knows an awful lot about veteran culture and active duty culture and was a drill sergeant in the Army and spent lots of time downrange with multiple injuries. So he's got a lot of insight, and he is also the founder of our sponsor, Healing the Heroes. And instead of a news story, we're going to take one story and pursue it to depth. And I hope you like it. This is an anomaly. It's a one-off. I'll be going back to the regular 6 stories for 7 a.m. for the rest of the week and ad infinitum. But the conversation I had with him was so important. I really wanted to share it with everyone. And so this is the interview with Dan Jarvis for our Monday 647. I hope you enjoy it, and God bless you. Dan Jarvis.
What's up, Chuck?
I put up a 647 story, I think it was Thursday or Friday last week, about the shooting at Fort Stewart. And you called me and you put up some ideas in that story, and I would like to clarify them.
Okay.
Then we had a conversation, and I said, your insight is too good to not put it out there, because most people, active duty or even veterans, are not going to put these ideas out there.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you to do your own intro. And if you don't do it well enough, I'm going to supplement.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Dan Jarvis. I'm the founder of Healing the Hero. We're a veteran first responder nonprofit, and our goal is to heal trauma in the community of veterans and first responders and their families, also Gold Star families and White Star families. I've deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan. I've also been a law enforcement officer in Florida for about a little over, actually 7 years. Yeah, we were talking about, because the big claim is the military is this big racist enemy. Right. Like there's a problem with racism in the military. And I'm going to tell you right now, I retired in 2014. It's not there. Right. I'll tell anybody that I talk to, when you're in a military uniform and you go downrange and your life depends on the man or woman to the left or the right of you, you don't give a rat's ass what color they are. You
Right.
just don't. I've worked with people of color, or black people, brown people, Filipino, Guamanian, Mexican, Puerto Rican, Asian, you name it, white people, Jews, Muslims. I've worked with all different types of people in the military space. I've deployed with many of them. And the biggest problem I think we're seeing in that space isn't racism, it's the perpetual victimization of people, right? And what I mean by that is the bullcrap of this diversity, equity, inclusion stuff that the military has been doing for the last 4 years of the Biden administration. We dealt with it substantially during the Obama administration. Morgan Freeman best said it: if you want racism to end, stop talking about it. And we've moved so far past it. We've had our first black president. I've worked for general officers who were black. I've had battalion commanders, officers who were black. I've worked with Mexican commanders. I've worked with sergeant majors of all different ethnic backgrounds. It just does not exist. When you are in a military uniform, the only thing you care about is, does that man or woman to your left or right have your back? That's it.
So Dan, let me just back up for anybody who sees this who's not familiar with what we're talking about. Last week, there was an active shooter incident at Fort Stewart in Georgia.
Right.
A Sergeant Cornelius Radford, 28-year-old, 7 years in the service, He sends a text message to his relatives saying, I hope you know I love you. I'm going to a better place. And 20 minutes later, in his working group of 6 people, himself and 5 other soldiers, he opens fire on the 5 other soldiers.
Right.
And so I'm saying to Dan, how the heck does a guy get his own personal firearm onto a military base? And how do all these guys work in a close group with this guy and nobody has any situational awareness? And then you called me and set me straight on both those issues.
Yeah, it's easy to get a weapon on a military base because one, we all take an oath to the Constitution, and all your bosses and commanders are supporters of that Constitution. So if you live on a military base, and I don't know where this guy lived, you can have a gun in your home on base. I can drive on a military base with a pistol in my truck. The gate guards will probably check one out of every 15 or 20 vehicles. That's the anti-terrorism posture, and they may or may not find it. And even if they did, there probably won't be a problem with it, right? Even when our guys lived in the barracks, my battalion commander in Alaska was such a pro gun guy. You don't want barracks. You don't want you don't want guns in the barracks with junior enlisted guys because alcohol and stupid things. But they had a safe at the staff duty desk where people could have their guns. They could bring their guns from the arms room and put it in the safe. And then on the weekend, when they go to the ranges, they can check their guns out. They can go shooting and they check the guns back in. Right? That's just the culture of the military. Military is not an anti-gun culture. Never has been. And so for him to be able to get a gun on a base today under a Trump administration, that's not that difficult, right? Because predominantly most of the folks are sound emotionally people, right? I don't know what this individual, what the sergeant had to deal with, but if for the last 4 years he's been getting pumped full of information, like you're only where you are because we're making these pathways for you forward and the white man's trying to keep you down. That's garbage. It's hot garbage, right? I did everything I could to get my soldiers that were considered minorities promoted because that's what you do as a good NCO is you build them up. You build everybody up, right? But if he's been told or fed a line of the victim status for the last 4 years, and then all of a sudden somebody changes that whole culture emotionally, he might think, well, this is exactly what they were talking about, right?
So you're saying this is a byproduct of all the diversity, equity, and inclusion, which that doctrine is saying to him, hey, you're a black soldier and you were treated unfairly. And so we're now going to correct that.
Right.
And you're going to be a special soldier for us. And then Trump comes in, Pete Hegseth comes in and is like, hey, we're done with all that. We're not going to have actually a racist military where we're picking people based on the color of their skin or their gender or how fluid their gender is. And a guy like this is, hey, wait a minute. I've been special for 4 or 5 years. And
Right.
now you're taking all that away. And
It,
he perceives that as racism.
it's highly possible, right? Because I'll tell you this, I was a drill sergeant. I spent 2 years as a drill at Fort Knox, Kentucky. We had an all male environment, and we would get people from all over the country. We would get people from continental US, outside continental US, from US territories, and you get the most diverse group of people. And oftentimes you bring them together. Well, if you were raised in the mountains of West Virginia, maybe you don't have a lot of interaction with African Americans. You come into a basic training environment, all of a sudden you're close quarters, you're going to see all kinds of different personality traits come out. And then it's your job as a drill sergeant to address it. And I'm going to share one story. I had two guys, it was a white guy and a black guy. They were at each other's throats, right? They were just literally like ready to throw down the gauntlet and go fight, right? Because neither one of them had interacted very much with each other's cultures. So what do? I had the two guys that were at each other's throats bring all their bags out of their bunk areas, put them in the middle of what they call the kill zone, and I had one of the other guys take all of his stuff and move it to the other guy. And then I had the two guys, the black guy and the white guy, and I moved them into the same bunk area. And I said, the two of you are going to bunk together for the rest of the cycle. And I said, and I looked at the one guy, I said, tomorrow when I come into work, you're going to tell me everything you know about this guy's family. And then I looked at the other guy and I said, when I get in tomorrow, you're going to tell me everything you know about his family. 3 days later, they're the best friends in the world because that's the culture of the military. There's no black, white, brown. There's camouflage, right? there's all different types of people, and you got to learn how to work together because that guy is going to be responsible for saving your backside when you guys deploy. So I believe that doing this whole diversity, equity, inclusion stuff has made people feel like a victim, like they can only be a certain way because we're letting this happen. And that's the wrong way to do it. Victim status is one of the most difficult emotions to overcome because a person in a position of power and authority, aka the President of the United States, Secretary of Defense, general officers, they come in and they tell you all these things, and there's a powerful emotional attachment to it, and that becomes a prevailing belief. So anything that challenges that belief, because what you're going to do is your brain is going to look for the things that supports that new belief structure. It's called indoctrination. All right, you're indoctrinating new soldiers. You're brainwashing a new soldier, one way or the other. And if they're brainwashing these new soldiers to think, well, the only way you're going to be able to get ahead in life is because we're letting you, and the system's been holding you down, they're going to feel like a victim, right? And then next thing you know, you're looking for data that supports that. Well, that data that supported it when Hegseth and President Trump came in is we're removing all of this woke DEI stuff. And this is Dan Jarvis talking. This is the combat veteran. This is not me speaking on behalf of my nonprofit. This is my personal opinion because I've had to experience this, right? Under the years of the Obama administration, we would have to do meetings on it was LGBTQ, whatever you want to call it. It's all these different
Pronouns. Right.
pronouns. And I got to the point where I would tell my guys, hey, somebody sign my name in, I'm not going to that meeting, right? But under George W. Bush, we were doing quarterly trainings on law of armed conflict, the law of Geneva Conventions, all of the different things that we would have to do in a normal
Combat.
military environment.
Yeah.
And it was very PC related when it came to Barack Obama. It was what was politically correct at the time. It's just crazy. The military is not a racist institution.
All right. I just want to tell everybody that I'm imposing on Dan for this interview. He's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan doing a big family event on a lake and not the best bandwidth. So some buffering's going on, but be patient. We want to get his insights, and we're going all the way up to Uperville to get it. All right. I want to bring up another aspect, and that is that I was saying to you, how could these five guys who unfortunately all were shot, but fortunately are surviving, how could they be with this guy all working as a group and nobody has a sense that something's not right? Nobody comes in and shoots all five people he works with without some of those people going, you know what? Something's not right with Sergeant.
Yeah, that's a good question because when you're dealing with somebody from an emotional,
Victim status and all this focus on race, those other guys have no incentive to bring up anything. Talk about that.
we can go back to the big shooting at Fort Hood years ago with the Middle Eastern doctor. He came in with the FN 5.7 and shot up a whole bunch of people. And I do believe that there are some commanders in that command that got into a lot of trouble because nobody wanted to address the issue because of fear of reprisals against their own careers. And that's really one of the things that Pete Hegseth is working on is finding a better way of promoting military officers. But there's a fear that if you say anything against any specific class of people, that it could detrimentally affect your career. It shouldn't, because that's not really what the military should be about. But if those five guys worked with this guy, they may not have known anything was wrong, right? But if he just got to the point where he got emotionally triggered, you see it across the country. The pendulum has swung so far to the left where, all of these organizations like the George Soros group is just really fomenting as much internal conflict in the nation as possible, in groups, out groups, whatever you want to call it. It would not, it's like, because when I was actively suicidal on active duty in 2013, nobody had a clue that I was emotionally compromised that way. So it's very likely that this guy could have been in the ranks and maybe they didn't see anything, or maybe they saw something and they were afraid to say something. And that's just the culture that these guys have come through the last 4 years is scared of. Because there was times where I'm like, man, is my career safe? Is my future safe? Because you're dealing with oftentimes you have some toxic leaders in there. It's part of the military. Don't get me wrong, I've had great commanders, but I've also had some that were not so great, right? So
Right.
it's not unlikely that this guy was struggling and they necessarily didn't know because nobody knew that I was even struggling. So that's not even, or there was this fear of, is my career safe if I say something?
So let's clean up your suicidal ideation
Yeah.
as a result of TBI, multiple TBIs.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, for me, when I was in Afghanistan, the last deployment, I had three traumatic brain injuries. Two of them were blast related, and I wasn't sleeping, so I wasn't able to process. And then one of my soldiers was killed, and it was the heaviness of the survivor guilt and feeling responsible. So when I got back from Afghanistan, I was doing okay until they moved me behind a desk, and I got moved into what was called a staff position because every NCO's got to have all their staff time in before getting promoted to the next level. When I was on the line, I was totally fine, and then when I sat behind a desk, I was in my thoughts all the time, and that's when I got to the point where I was suicidal. Doug Cordo was one of my kids that was killed, and I felt responsible for that. Every time I would see his mom post something on social media, it was like a dagger going through my gut, through my heart. For me, it was just an emotional up and down 24/7. And then I would self-medicate with alcohol in order to calm my nervous system. And then you're depressing your nervous system, and then you're depressed, you're not processing. That's really what happened with me. And then when I got out of service, I went through and I started a nonprofit. We started dealing with ways how to heal trauma, anxiety, depression, and then we got into the science behind brain scans, and Dr. Hagedorn from Evoke Neuroscience, now it's Firefly Neuroscience, did a brain scan for me and showed me the physical injury of the TBI, and then gave me a course of action to correct it holistically, doing neural feedback. And now I don't have the ups and downs like I had related to the TBI. I sleep, I process normally, I track my sleep with an Aura ring. So I know how much deep sleep, how much REM sleep I get every night, which is amazing, but um, that's, that's kind of that.
So now I want to take everything that you just said
Mhm.
and overlay it to Sergeant Radford
Okay.
because he had, by his things that I've read his father say, that he lost his mother when he was young. It was a very traumatic event for him.
Sure.
He suffered bouts of depression because of that. In May, he was arrested for drunk driving and running a red light, and he was going to have to go before a court, not a military court. The military didn't even know this happened, and I don't understand how that could happen. But on August 20th, he was going to have to face a court for drunk driving. He probably felt it's the end of my career anyway.
Right.
What light can you shed on that?
Yeah, well, it makes sense. Like a lot of people that develop post-traumatic stress or depression, anxiety, a lot of it is rooted in early childhood. So losing his mother would have been extremely traumatic, depending upon the age, even if he was an adult. That was one of my issues, is I lost my mother when I was deployed. And then it makes sense with the self-medication, and the next thing you know, you're driving a car, and then you get a DUI. How the military didn't know is a little bit surprising because they do what's called a blotter report every week. The blotter report comes out, and the base military police get all the military people that get arrested. Not to mention, if you get a DOI off base, they're typically going to call the MPs to come pick you up, and then it goes right up your chain of command. So I don't know how that got through, but it fits, right? If it's a shoe that fits. If he's depressed, people self-medicate with alcohol, they get more depressed, then they do bad decisions like drive. And then now it's his career, because a lot of alcohol related events in the civilian community is a career ender now. When 30 years ago, when it was the Cold War, it wouldn't end your career. Now it will end your career. So who knows where this guy's thought process was. To me, it sounded like sending text messages off like he did, that he was not going to survive, is the way it sounds. So he was going to go out suicide by cop or whatever you want to call it. Because a lot of people don't understand, when you're in a fully emotionally triggered state, if his nervous system is fully active, you're losing access to your prefrontal cortex. So you're losing logic brain, you're losing your ability to have normal impulse control. You don't have impulse control. And then you're also losing empathy for people that are around you. So if he's fully triggered and he sees these five other guys in his unit, he might just say, "Hey, you guys are part of the system, so you're part of the enemy, and I'm going to make the army realize what's happening." He's not the only active shooter that's ever been in the military. There have been active shooters all throughout. I can remember we had one back in like the late 80s, early 90s. It was a pretty big one, more significant than this one. So it happens. The military is going to be a dichotomy of your population. So you're going to get people from all over, all walks of life. If you really want to go down a rabbit hole, just go into the history of active shooters nationally, not on a base, but outside, and you'll see many of them are veterans all the way back into the 60s when the Marine shooter in the water tower started killing people. And the DC shooter was an Army veteran. The guy out in California that shot up the nightclub, he was a veteran. And the guy that shot
In Texas and the
Texas,
clock tower at the
right,
university. Yeah.
the Navy shipyard in Virginia, he was a Navy Reserve veteran. The guy that shot up all the Dallas police officers was a veteran. But that doesn't mean because they're veterans that that's the reason. That just means they got into the military and they learned how to really use a weapon effectively. And I used to tell my guys when I was a deputy, just bear in mind, many of your veterans are better trained on weapon systems than you are as a police officer, right? Hands down, easily. But if they're emotionally unstable, and it's not necessarily a PTSD thing, it could be something totally different, right? If you have a significant traumatic brain injury and you don't have impulse control and you're not making logical decisions, you're not even in control of your functioning, is really what you're dealing with. But it is a scary thought to know how many veterans, and even veterans in general, since 9/11, there's been over 250,000 of them incarcerated, or what they call justice involved vets, because when you're emotionally up and down, you typically make poor decisions. And then this sergeant at Fort Stewart made a super poor decision. Just thank God that none of those men or women that were shot actually died. And thank God for those that came to the rescue and stopped him, because it could have been a lot worse. But yeah.
Dan, I think you covered this. I certainly learned a lot from your first conversation and even more from this. And I know you guys got a big family dinner coming in minutes, right?
Yeah, I think I saw them all walking down. They're probably already starting.
Okay. So
There'll be
we're gonna
couple
let
leftovers.
we're gonna let you go.
All right, brother.
Thank you very much for giving us this time. I really appreciate it.
You got it, man. Anytime. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Have fun. Enjoy your family.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.